Well, hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. New Battleground season is almost upon us. It is set to start later today, so once again we are going to go over the metas, the potential MVPs, and we'll take a look at some potential champions to rank up. So in this video we are going to be primarily looking at the victory track meta that lasts entire month, and effectively the meta that is almost the same, which is weeks 1 and 2 of Gladiator Circuit. There are only a handful of champions that are severely affected by the long distance relationship. But first things first. So the buffs. So, attacker buffs, we effectively have Thanos' Necro synergy that buffs up all the Deathless champions. Needless to say that at least half of these Deathless champions will be significantly too shit, even with the added buffs, to do anything meaningful in Battlegrounds. I'm looking at you, Vision, and King Groot. Let's face it, King Groot will do little more than be just like a beefy health pool to be stuck on defense that can get nuked by Mystic champions that are going to be plentiful in this meta. And then we have Vision Deathless, where even with the increased max Fury stacks and the ease of upkeeping them, is still just a noodle. I mean, like, yeah, no, I don't think people, no, just no. However, both Guillotine Deathless and She-Hulk actually have significant benefits specifically working for this met. So Guillotine on activation, special 1 inflicts an unstacking 150% neutralized passive for 15 seconds. So basically just spam your level 1s and you can completely ignore fight or flight node, and Guillotine does not rely on parry stunts in any meta, and she is pretty much set to go in this meta to be as aggressive as she possibly can be. So if you do have a rank 2 or 3 Guillotine Deathless, she can potentially be of use. And similar to Deathless She-Hulk, where punishing opponent's special or heavy attack will grant you a grit buff for 10 seconds, which effectively will let you bypass the node as well. So both Deathless She-Hulk and Guillotine, are viable. Then, moving forward, the Defender buffs. So we have Fight or Flight, which is a significant node, but I wouldn't even say the main one here. Fight or Flight, so every 12 seconds, the defender gains Unstoppable buff for 4 seconds. If the attacker is far away from the defender when this triggers, the attacker gains Unstoppable buff instead. This buff, by its nature, largely actually helps Mystic class as a whole, because if you do use Mystic champions on attack, and you let your opponent get that Unstoppable, you will be feeding your Mystic Dispersion. Also, many Mystic champions have ways to prevent the defender from gaining this buff in the first place, or just are able to nullify it or deal with it once opponents get it, again feeding the Mystic Dispersion. And if you're using a Mystic champion offensively and you do happen to get that Unstoppable buff, well, it's not hurting you and it's not slowing you down in any way, shape, or form. So Mystic class is kind of the runaway favorite immediately from this node alone. Additionally, we do have Limber, where each time the defender receives a stun debuff, they reduce the duration of further stun debuffs by 20%. There are a few ways around it, but this does make the fighting much more annoying. There will be plenty of times when you can go for a stun and opponent's gonna shrug it off quickly and smack you in the face or end up parrying you, so you do have to be very, very careful when you stun your opponent at all. And in some matchups that does cause quite significant problems. For instance, when you need to wait out specific things and you need to dance around, you will often be triggering stuns also by mistake, and yeah, it's kind of a finicky node that will just continuously keep catching people. And not to mention the fact that after playing this meta for a while, you will be kind of afraid to parry stun opponents for a significant portion of time. That always happens when we do get a node that significantly alters the way you play. For instance, previously when we had Mixmaster, many people switched to medium light medium combos or light light medium in order to be able to drop the full combo, and it just felt weird going back to the regular combos afterwards. And then in the Gladiator Circuit, we do have long distance relationship. Long distance relationship primarily will be affecting Juggernaut for most part, not too many other champions. It's actually going to be powering up a few champions, but in general serve as a willpower feed and to kind of slow the fights down. So let's take a look at some of the MVPs. As I mentioned, we do have Deathless Guillotine and Deathless She-Hulk, both whom are viable. I wouldn't necessarily rush to specifically take these champions up to rank 3 for these metas, but if you have, good for you. Moving on, Shield. Shield is one of the few skilled champions that completely can ignore the unstoppable effects, which kind of wants me to take her to rank 3, because unstoppable is also going to be very much so present in the next meta as well. So she is a potential rank 3 candidate for me as well, because she will be good the entire month effectively in Victory Track and Gladiator Circuit. And yeah, that comes from her grit from level 1, which is going to be tremendously useful, and also her added capability of blocking, because she can effectively just tank all the hits in a block and take very little damage. That makes her suitable for a playstyle that does not force you to rely on parries to get openings. Then we have Shang-Chi, because not only Shang-Chi does have the slow debuff that is very easy to access, which will effectively negate the node. Also, the Shang-Chi's stun from Wushu strikes effectively bypasses the limber, and that, as long as you use it early in the combination, and obviously that will make for fairly smooth gameplay. So if you do have highly ranked Shang-Chi, that definitely is a solid add for the meta. Then we have Stealth Suit Spider-Man. He does not have anything for limber, but he doesn't really need to be, because his playstyle doesn't particularly involve a lot of parrying. And he does have access to easy slow. Obviously, not being available as a 7-star will hurt his usability, but as 6-star rank 5 ascended champion should still be able to perform decently. Bullseye is here because of his improved capabilities on defense, because several of the Bullseye's counters typically do involve parrying Bullseye a lot and, waiting out for their wait window. And it's just that, stun me and Bullseye automatically becomes significantly more frustrating and finicky. And that's what he effectively will be after the first couple of stuns. So he is going to be harder than normal on defense, similar to Killmonger actually, because Killmonger is a type of champion where you do need to keep track on quite a lot of things. Like for instance, when he has counterpunch charge, you can't hit his block, or when he has his reverb active, you need to pay attention when you activate it, and that often can lead you to getting cornered or not being able to create distance at all times, and just giving that extra unstoppable timer to watch out for typically makes for a fairly hard fight. Then we have the tech MVP, moving on to the tech class. So far in my testing in off-season, Starhand Spider-Man has been just about the most valuable champion offensively in the entire meta, because he does not rely particularly on stuns. You kind of wind him up and then you nuke the opponents down. You typically do have fairly solid control over the distance management. And yeah, he puts in work. Without a doubt, he can be used a ton. And whenever you do need to work around that unstoppable window, you can do so just by, dexing and replenishing your poise charges. Then we do have Shuri. Shuri still works fine-ish. You obviously do need to be careful with how much and often you parry, but you can also just parry and block special attacks, which will still replenish her kinetic charges. So Shuri is one of the few champions that I've found to be working quite well, especially because both her special attacks create distance. So as long as you shoot them just before the unstoppable is going to trigger, then the unstoppable is going to get placed on you rather than your opponent, because her special attacks push the opponent away. Jack-o'-lantern still seems to be functioning somewhat fine, because he does have one of those playstyles where you can just stop on a dime. It's not do that and then race to this and that. It's more so, you want to throw off your level 1 for extra damage, and then you go for level 2 for the big damage. And you can pause and you can wait up and you can back off in moments, when that unstoppable would trigger. Obviously, it still increases complexity of the fights if that unstoppable wasn't there, but he did seem to function much better than most of the tech class. And Shocker is another guy who's passive stun on level 2, does not get affected by limber, so you can use him relatively normally, and he's completely stun immune on defense due to the limber, so he can be kind of frustrating defender as well. And Prowler works decently because of his falter and extra openings and added power control. And yeah, he still has been one of the bigger threats there in the game. Defensively, I think one of the newer releases, in theory, should be quite hard to counter, which is Arnim Zola, because the entire shtick about him is you do want to parry him with champions that can parry and then land your heavy attacks. But now, a lot of those champions and potential best counters do go away because of the limber. So even if you can parry projectiles, let's say with Angela or Photon or some other champions, there will be very few times you can actually throw that heavy attack, because the stun window is shortening, plus the timer of unstoppable is going to make it again kind of finicky and trickier to deal with him. So I do think that Animzol is quite a formidable defender thanks to Limber in this meta. Moving on the Mutant class, we do have Negasonic Teenage Warhead, which is going to be exceptionally awesome against skill champions, because every time you parry, it's a passive stun, and then you only need to kind of worry about the Unstoppable, which again, you can play around. And overall, other than that, yeah, the Limber leaves no effect on her, and she's a great counter to your skill defenders. Onslaught is significantly harder to use than he normally would be, but he still works perfectly fine, and he's obviously a dual threat, so you will want to be running your Onslaught. Spider Ham, again, short and stun duration do kind of mess with him as well as the Unstoppable, but overall he has, out of most of the Science Champions, kind of showed that he is one of the ones that functions the best, because with level 1 you can still pause your power stings indefinitely. At that point you can either wait out opponents Unstoppable, or you can create distance to gain that Unstoppable yourself, and he just still seemed to work somewhat better than most other Science Champions. Speaking of, Photon still works relatively great overall. Obviously still a massive pain on the defense, and offensively still a perfectly capable champion too. You do need to pay attention to the Unstoppable, but her playstyle doesn't particularly force you to rely on parries in general, and then you do have the phase of level 2 that can be used to get extra openings. And if you do get parried by accident when dealing with Limber, obviously she's just going to go invisible herself, and you will be kind of safe, so this still has that foolproof net. We have Titania that still functions relatively fine, especially since she does have staggers on her heavy attacks, so this time around you kind of want to throw more heavy attacks if the opportunity arises, in order to be able to stagger that Unstoppable and maintain the aggression. We do have She-Hulk as a new release 7-star. She should be a fairly good fit as well. And then moving on to the Mystic class, we do have Absorbing Man, who obviously thrives in situations where Unstoppable is present, because he shortens the duration of Unstoppables, and yeah, in general just does quite well, and still gets that Mystic Dispersion fed kind of thing. And yeah, Longshot is a very good shout here, because Longshot, especially high sig Longshot, will always have a chance to benefit from that Unstoppable. So either you will get that Unstoppable, which obviously does not hurt you at all, or your opponent gets the Unstoppable, you nullify it with your sig ability and gain the Unstoppable yourself, which is a great switcheroo, which simultaneously also feeds your Mystic Dispersion, therefore power bar. And on defense, he can be, more annoying too, because your choices are either let Longshot get that Unstoppable, and that, can be problematic, or you get the Unstoppable whilst you're avoiding that, but you get your Unstoppable nullified and Longshot regains it, so he can be quite annoying to deal with here in this scenario. Juggernaut is going to be an absolute menace in the victory track, but completely useless in GC for weeks 1 and 2, because yeah, he fits with the meta quite well. He does have access to stagger, which you can land quite easily in order to stagger away the Unstoppables from opponent, or you just getting Unstoppable, is not going to hurt you or slow you down. But in Gladiator Circuit, the weaknesses from long distance relationship will completely ruin him. So great for victory track, not so much for that. We have Tigra. Tigra is, gonna function pretty much perfectly fine here, because you do typically not get your openings from parry stance anyways. You do want to be spamming your heavies and specials and neutralizing everything. As long as you have neutralized on the opponent, you can get rid of the Unstoppable from opponents there, and, just feed your Tigra's abilities and get a bit of extra damage. So she's effectively unimpeded if you still use Tigra with all the AI issues and the power creep coming in the game. We have Enchantress. I wanted to highlight Enchantress because she truly is one of the more annoying defenders in this meta, because she's a Mystic champion, and the entire thing about dealing with Enchantress is getting rid of her spells before she reaches a part of power. It puts you in a very kind of precarious position where if you get the Unstoppable, eventually that Unstoppable will feed her Mystic Dispersion, thus pushing her to a bar of power quicker, giving you less opportunities to bait those heavy attacks, land those intercepts, and knock her down, and so on and so forth. So she's very much so more annoying than she normally is in a vanilla meta. We have Werewolf by Night, who in testing has been doing absolutely amazing for me. is fairly simple character, but the fact that his playstyle kind of makes you dash away from your opponent, you can control the unstoppable quite well. Even if it does get up on the opponent, obviously you can benefit from Mystic Dispersion there, but for most of the time he's just one of those champions that absolutely does not rely on parry stun, and also you will be getting that unstoppable for yourself, because half the time you are creating distance, by striking the blocks or, trying to howl, and that lets you deal with the nodes quite a bit easier. Then we have obviously a bunch of other Mystic champions who will work well. I just wanted to point out some of the ones that have netted me the best results. Defensively, Serpent is still going to be absolutely great champion, but you do need to note that there are significantly more Mystics running around, so he is not necessarily an auto draft at the moment, at the very least for me in this meta, because chances are there will be, counters present. Still a very, very big defensive force, as he pretty much always going to be. Cosmic Glass, obviously Thanos is still great. Has unstoppable built in with himself. He will function offensively perfectly fine because he gets a lot of his openings through counterpunch, so you do not need to worry about the limber. Plus you do have access to passive stun and the heavy attack through your regular combo as well, and your special attacks push the opponent away. That lets you deal easier with unstoppable there, and obviously defensively he's still going to be a threat too. Maestro, without being able to parry, all of a sudden becomes a bit more dangerous as well. But again, keep an eye out for the Mystic champs. So far, Medusa has been doing relatively fine for me. I wouldn't necessarily say she's the MVP, but where Cosmic champions are involved, she has been doing quite well. And I have been seeing more Bait Ray builds, and Bait Ray builds also going to be great for the upcoming meta for weeks 3 and 4, as one of the best counters to Unstoppable in the Cosmic class, because as you are charging your heavy attack, you will be gaining that grit buff for 15 seconds, letting you effectively ignore the Unstoppable. Bait Ray build fans and lovers, rejoice. In theory, he should be making quite big waves and impacts in the upcoming month in the game. So overall, that is what I think about the meta so far. I will make a follow-up video once I finish Victory Track and tell you how my deck has changed and what I used exactly. But there you go. These are the potential MVPs of the upcoming meta. Let me know what you think, which ones you would add, and how been working the best for you. And I'll catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about